All right, hi everybody. This is Jim Lee from RadiumOne. Here to talk about how Tableau makes being a little dangerous extremely dangerous, which is, I guess, shorthand for my story of just kind of building a grassroots BI platform, and specifically from a business guy's point of view. And I'll kind of talk about why that's really important, and it's kind of one of the major themes I wanted to talk about. So just a brief description of who I am and what my company does, kind of set the context. So I work for RadiumOne, which is a digital advertising platform. So our goal is to drive business and business results for clients and different brands. And we're all about showing advertisements across lots of digital touch points and, with the intent of moving people down the sales funnel. So as much as there's a lot of ad technology out there, segmentation, big data, our key focus is really on driving real results, less waste, for our clients. We kind of have three big pillars of how we do that. The first is intelligence. And, for as much data is out there and in our industry, what a big market there is for third-party data and other commodity data, we're really about ingesting our own proprietary data. So we have lots of different data sources, our own homegrown widgets, and sharing devices that we use to generate data and data segments. And we really believe that when we're looking at data, especially in the ad tech industry, to differentiate us from being like a commodity service and really to understand segmentation and understand the information that we can get from data, we need to have our own data sources. So that's one big pillar of our company. The other, activation and insight, that's really more about how we service our clients and our products. So activation in the sense that, we run ads all over the internet, on mobile devices, on video, mobile, any really format that you can really think of. And we do that programmatically, meaning most of the ads that we buy, so most of the ads you see on the internet, if you can think of any banner as like a virtual billboard, we bid on that on lots of different ad exchanges. And we try to provide the best in breed in consumer behavior tracking and applications. And this insight piece is actually an interesting that I'll try to talk about later in the presentation about how we sort of disseminate that to our clients. But in a nutshell, we try to put ads on the internet the best way possible, and you kind of count us in one of those companies who follows you around the internet and shows you ads to listen in. A bit about me. So I'm Jim, and I actually run all operations for RadiumOne for our advertising business. And by training, I'm fundamentally a business guy. I'm not actually originally an operations guy. I used to be a consultant. I was a business analyst at Yahoo for a while. And I think my point there is I've had to use numbers and analytics, I suppose, throughout my career in a number of different fashions. So when you're a management consultant, you're all about showing fancy charts and data. And in some ways, you're trying to aggregate ideas as conceptually as possible. And to some degree, you want to not so much skip detail, but the point you're trying to really make is about a story. And in some degree, a lot of the nuance you have to take for given or you have to take for granted. In my sort of career after consulting was kind of the exact opposite at Yahoo. We're dealing with large, huge analytical systems to do customer LTV, to do a lot of valuation of marketing channels, brand valuation. And that is kind of your classic garbage in, garbage out. Super powerful algorithms, a lot of data coming in, but not necessarily a lot of technical business value. And the reason why I sort of bring that up is, coming to my job today, being in operations, it's a very, very highly detailed and delicate environment. And using the data that we have, we will actually make daily decisions about how we're running different ad campaigns. And we'll make decisions where we'll lose revenue, we'll gain revenue, we'll add value to our clients and not add value to our clients. So the point, I think, a lot is that, I've seen data done, used in many, many different fashions. And, for me, in this day and age, average and averages are not okay. And I think it's a key tendency when you're trying to explain different stories to make aggregates or to some degree, not even have the details you need to really make a great decision. And again, that's going to be another kind of theme that I'm going to be talking about. So what are the goals of this particular presentation? Part of the reason here is I just want to tell you my story of how I've been using Tableau and in kind of the context of everything I just spoke about, and then all the way through from just using desktop to our server implementation. And to also shamelessly plug their product and earn my conference pass for why I'm actually here. But there's kind of three major ideas I want to get across. One is this, what I call a very large value gap between analysts, in quotes, and analysts. And I mean that by a business analyst, like a business guy, and a true data analyst, meaning somebody who actually has access to the data and can write a coherent SQL query. The second is about really power and flexibility and to do things with data that you actually never thought possible. And this is some degrees related to this sort of gap that I talk about in number one. And I kind of want to illuminate some of the things that brought the RadiumOne that we never even thought that we could possibly do, and different resources that it saved us. And the last thing is that you, the business guy, can build a BI platform too. Quite often, business people have their needs, and we kind of explain that to our sort of technical or data counterparts. And I think to some degree, there's a lot that's lost in translation about what can happen, just given all the tools and the resources that the data versus what you want, and what you think you may want, and what you don't know that you may want. So while I am in the advertising business, I'm not really here to talk about advertising, but I'm happy to show you how we have used it in that context. So let's talk about a little bit of data at RadiumOne. And I'm kind of a big proponent of kind of separating the idea of data and information. So what our data tends to look like, or what we look at in our operations. So again, fundamentally what we're trying to do is execute an ad campaign for our client the best way possible. So we have a host of transactional metrics. So this would just be things like how many ads did we show? Did people click on the ad? How much did the ad cost when we were in the bidding environment? Did we generate any conversions from the ad? Did we show somebody an ad and they subsequently sign up for a credit card or sign up for a test drive? The other dimension would be audience metrics and indexing. So of these people that I showed impressions to, of these people who actually clicked, who were they? And, what time of day did they do it? And by any, to some degree, arbitrary segmentation of data that we have, how do these different audience metrics index against each other? Or some unholy combinations too. So if I would kind of light that up, like transactional metrics is about what is happening when we're running an ad campaign. And if I set a couple of strategies, I want to say that these 4 buying strategies actually work, and I should allocate more resources to these strategies. Audience metrics would just be, mothers react more positively to this ad. And some unholy combination would be mothers react positively Tuesday night more than Monday night when cross-referenced against just viewed entertainment content. And that kind of last thing, it just sort of made up, it kind of gives you the sense of our thought process when we're trying to do targeting, and that the data that we demand has to be at that granularity and that flexibility for us to really, compete against other people who are also running the same ad campaign, and for us to really just generate as much value as possible. So again, the big thing here is really about separating what our data looks like and what is the information that we actually need. All right, so let's get a little bit more specific. So a common type of ad campaign we run is to drive a specific conversion action. So let's say we're running an ad campaign for a large sandwich chain, and what we will do is try to work with that client to give us some amount of data that we can target. So what we can actually instrument with our clients is, for instance, we can tell when, say, a user starts reading an online menu, and if they subsequently order a sandwich, what is the time gap between it? So what you're looking at in this chart is the number of minutes after reading an online menu and the number of sandwiches ordered after that minute. So you can see it's a pretty big spread here. Actually, let me realize it. a little bit log scale, which it should have to begin with. So you can see what this is saying is within, again, number of sandwiches ordered here on the y-axis. Most people tend to order their sandwiches within 20 minutes of reading an online menu. So if we're running an ad campaign and somebody reads the online menu and sort of leaves that site and we want to try to push them back in, we will try to heavily target people who have read the online menu within 20 minutes, because this is when most people tend to do it. That's what this data is saying. As you can see, it tends to sort of fall off. Further away you go from, further time away you go from reading a menu and you subsequently leave the site, the less sandwiches are ordered. But you can kind of see, you kind of have this strange pattern here that kind of comes up to the right. And you can see here, this is at, you kind of get this spike here at 1,440 minutes, 2,800 minutes, and about 4,400 minutes. And what you're actually looking at is different day cycles, meaning that most people, after they read an online menu, will probably order it within that day. But they actually might not consider doing it that instant. They might come back the next day and do it. They might come back 2 days later and do it. And what you're really looking at these spikes here is that people have to tend to order sandwiches, say, somewhere around noon or somewhere at the same time when they're actually likely to want lunch. So what does this actually mean for what we have to do? If I'm running an ad campaign against this particular data, this means that I probably want to do a heavy focus, you know, on these kinds of people. But people who have actually read the menu, they actually may come back several days later. So I may actually want to target these people at this time, even though there's not that many sandwiches that are ordered out in the future. But if I'm thinking about balancing a portfolio of different advertising, trying to get as much value as I can across all the data that I can, this kind of data is extremely important in deciding how we can kind of react and show consumers, react to showing ads specific to their behavior. So again, this is just to give you kind of an idea of kind of how we think and how we use data. Okay, so let's kind of talk about the history and really the genesis of this particular talk. And this is kind of going back to me just being a business guy and talking about some basic issues that I think a lot of us sort of business people who need quantitative information have. So here's a typical conundrum that we have. You have me, the business guy, who probably lives and dies in Excel, versus, you know, what I call the beanbag Buddha, which is a data analyst. So this is Randall here. He's kind of our lead data analyst at MIT. Sorry, at RadiumOne, and he went to MIT with Teeth and Mercer before. But the basic difference is that, you know, with Excel, I can kind of ask myself one or more questions, and I have sort of flexibility of a very, very limited scope of data. And this is just literally, and not only just sheer size of the data set that I can use, but literally how powerful is the application. And even if I'm just trying to run a pivot table or do some basic calculations, what are my limitations? So to some degree, you know, I can format my data. I can do, you know, I can massage my data. I can play as I go in my own sandbox, but I'm very limited in scope. And if I need to do something that has kind of more power, you know, I can ask my analyst, but really I can kind of ask him sort of one question at a time. And I'm just really literally talking about how would I engage with this person in real life. I would probably ask him, this is kind of what I'm trying to figure out. He has the full scope of data. He can run anything we have, but he has to sort of come back with what I think, what he thinks I need. And if it's not exactly what I need, I kind of have to rinse and repeat, and he has to go back an entire cycle, extract data. So the kind of conundrum we sort of face when we actually have an output. So what tends to happen is that, you know, you kind of have this, you know, crazy analyst approach where you have really, really complicated spreadsheets. People start employing VBA, and I kind of have this mantra that if you're using VBA, you're probably doing it wrong. Or you have a very, very robust solution from the data team, which is very, very slow in, I guess, cycling different needs. And really, they can only show you kind of what is the lowest common denominator for everybody. So I kind of have these two little data memes that I need up here. But this is, I think, actually a real problem for getting real business value out of the data, and again, kind of being able to avoid the average. So being an ex-consultant, I I would kind of sum them up to just what I call my comically janky conceptual matrix of data value, is that power and versatility, Excel kind of up here, and to some degree versatility is about speed. But if you're talking about power and versatility, when I'm talking to Randall, my data analyst, not too versatile, but a lot of power. And really where I want to be is kind of sort of lost city Atlantis up here. I call this my data D&D. So this is kind of somewhat this gap that I'm referring to, and I'm going to kind of transition a little bit and talk about how we've sort of filled this gap at RadiumOne, specifically with using Tableau. So let me take you a little bit backwards in time to 2010. So right now, RadiumOne's primary business is in digital advertising online on mobile devices and online on the PC. But even before that, a lot of our pitch and all of our technology is based on social data, meaning that if we can read connections between people by the content that they share, we think that that's a good indication that we can amplify different audiences and tell that if somebody likes cars, then somebody near them is going to like cars. So when we first kind of had this thesis, our actual business was actually not in online advertising, but it was actually in social gaming, and we were actually in a virtual currency platform. And that business is basically represented by millions of transactional records of 50 dimensions of people reacting to different offers in which they could ad offers in which they could answer and essentially earn themselves virtual currency in the game that they're playing. So if you think about our platform was designed to make money as soon as possible. It wasn't necessarily designed to be user-friendly to our internal analysts to even do anything. So we didn't even have any summary aggregation of what was happening across any metadata or any like logical business aggregation that we need. The only thing we had was a huge table of data with really, really bad CSV download capabilities that pretty much offered zero analytical value. So you were very, very limited in even the time it took to get the data out, much less to be able to make a business decision. So after a very hard negotiated STB dump of a flat file of all the transactions, so this is literally just to extract the system, we were looking for an application that actually be able to crunch that data. And I think, in 2010, I think it's Tableau 6 or Tableau 7 is out. And we just heard of this product and we downloaded it. And we ran the first set of data in with just a couple of metadata groupings and came out with this chart. Now, unfortunately, I don't have the original data sources since so long ago. So this is literally just a screenshot that I took a long time ago in an email that I actually sent to manage the first time I had Tableau. So what you're looking at is cumulative revenue over time for 4 different offer sets. And so basically we had ads that were free, we had ads that were video, we had ads that were paid offers, which was like sign up for Netflix, and we had direct pay, which was just give us money and we'll give you our universal currency in exchange. So again, what you're looking at is cumulative revenue by hour of each of these different kinds of offers and sort of payment methods. And the thing that blew me away when I first looked at this is, even though I had a good sense of the relative amount, again, this is all on the same y-axis, you can see the different variants, not only an hourly, but also from day to day. So each line represents a different day. So this is a kind of first aha moment of where we're actually seeing not only where most of our revenue is coming from in a data-driven and non-infused fashion, but also where was our revenue stability, and given any kind of activity that would happen out of the paid or direct offer, how might that affect my current day's revenue or even the revenue in the days forward? And as you can see, on this particular day, for this orange line, you can see this kind of one spike here. This is actually a day I think we actually got hacked, and a bunch of people were doing a bunch of paid offers illegitimately. And we were able to spot that almost immediately using Tableau, which is not something we'd ever been able to do before. So using the same data for the same business, we actually made our first monitor, outside of our production system. So this is literally my first view of what our virtual currency business actually looked like. So you are actually seeing the same 4 offer types, probably revenue and completion rate by hour as it went across the day. Again, this is something that we never really had before. But I think one important thing is that going from this original view to this original view was probably the span of about 2 minutes, and not a week-long cycle asking for a monitor going back and forth. All right, so more time goes by, and we expand our different businesses, and now I kind of take over the current role that I'm in now, that is in our core advertising business, and we kind of have the same deal where we have these sort of transactional tables, and we have an amazing ad server, but it doesn't report so well. But sort of this time I'm ready, and given the value that we were able to bring with those first 2 monitors that I showed you, we were now able to re-justify sort of more FTP dumps, excuse this while it's booting up, and immediately make a monitor for a more complex business. So what you're looking at now is to some degree what a sanitized version of what I look at every day, and literally how we monitor revenue, activity level, margin level for our entire business. And this is kind of like a data monitor that you're kind of looking at by hour. And, with sort of this, you can see if, the way this operated was like literally, people knew that Tableau was valuable, and the engineering team was literally generating me an FTP dump every single hour. So at this point, actually, I'm recording this beforehand, so you have to apologize for the typos, but I promise you I will fix these before the actual conference, if you actually see me live. So sorry, back to my point is that it was pretty obvious that having this automated and at your fingertips without any kind of manual file upload was the way to go. And we switched to server, and literally this one monitor alone was enough to rationalize our switch to server. And so let me talk about our basic server setup. So before I was receiving just basic FTP dump files from my engineering team, and what this required doing was essentially determining certain aggregate tables with my data team. And what we're doing is we are reading SQL tables that are being generated from our data warehouse and running those through Tableau data extract. And there's probably lots of different ways to set that up, but I think my key point here to at least the business people is that in some ways you still have to think about averages in terms of aggregate, but the way that you would think about getting your data is probably not the same way you would think about it if you were just asking for one specific data set or a slice of data you would use to run in Tableau. To some degree, you have to start thinking in between what you could possibly ever get out of your data warehouse and what you could think to handle just in Excel. And so I think it's really important that, and we'll touch on this a bit later, about the common understanding that you as a business person have of what Tableau can do, and your data team understanding that sort of same concept, because the requests that you're asked for, at least for me, are very, very different than any kind of data set that I've asked for in my career, mostly because I can ask for a lot more granularity and a lot more data because the applications that I have in mind are going to be native only to Tableau. Okay, so let's talk about a couple of my server applications to show you how we've used it. All right, so no more manual crappy FTP and CSV files. So the first and to some degree most important server application was the, I guess, serverization of this monitor that we're looking at. And this actually exists. We actually use this as almost our real-time monitoring system. So we don't depend on our engineering team to some degree at all to make us any monitors within our own internal platform that we log into. We have a separate platform called Ziggy, which is our BI platform. And this is an example of a couple of monitors that sit by our operations team. Although, unfortunately, right now this is broken and we're getting this entire thing upgraded. But I kind of wanted to give you an example of, for operational people, if you kind of have real-time and transactional data, kind of what you can do. So you can see this lower left-hand monitor here, which is the same thing as this monitor, which we're actually going to look at live. And I'll have to remind myself when I do the presentation to actually cache all these up before I start. But what you're actually looking at is how we predict revenue for every day. So again, each line is a different day. Each of these graphs represents, I guess you could call it like a different business unit and how much money they're going to make a day, and then the aggregate, and then margin for all of our different businesses. So this is just immediately, I can tell in 5 seconds how much money we're probably going to make by the end of the day, and I know whether we're going to do it profitably or not. So this is a monitor that will probably sits in this lower left-hand corner for, you know, as long as possible. But let's say that one day my engineering team tells me that they're pushing a fix, and you know, they expect that a certain, let's just say conversion tracking may not work so well. So, okay, so I'm thinking to myself, all right, how am I actually going to be able to figure that out? So this is exactly what would happen. So I'm going to look at this metric called eCPA. And what eCPA is cost per acquisition. And this is basically, if we're trying to drive a conversion action for a client, how much is that costing? So if there's if we're missing tracking features in our UI because we make a push and there might be a bug, I'm going to see a fluctuation in the metric. So, but how do I actually want to see that in the smartest way possible? Well, given that this push is going to already happen sometime this morning, I'm going to kind of look at it by hour. And hour is probably not good enough because I know that Sunday reacts different to Monday, reacts different to Tuesday. So I'm going to throw weekday on there, by weekday. And then I want to kind of have a sense of past history. So I'm going to go ahead and draw a line for every single day. All right, so now we're talking. And I know I kind of poo-pooed averages the other day, but just to give my sense, give myself a point of reference, I'm going to go ahead and make a quick reference line for averages. All right, so we got that red line. Make this a little bit more in. Okay, and I'm just going to highlight my last few days here. Okay, so what am I looking for? So my VP of engineering told me that, okay, conversion tracking might go down in a little bit, might go down this morning, say on Thursday. So I better watch the system. So I'm looking at this blue line here for Thursday. Let me read there. Sorry, I can't double highlight that. And it looks like this line is not necessarily below my average, it's kind of above it. So that kind of looks like it's actually pretty okay. So I can go ahead and tell my VP of engineering that I'm not seeing anything on my monitors that's happened. So then another example of what happens, like, oh no, Jim, actually I'm going to push that feature like in 4 hours. I haven't already pushed it yet. So you need to be paying attention at that point. So what I'll literally do is I'll literally take this view and stick it on one of these monitors for us to be watching while the push is happening. So this is, you know, pretty instantaneous monitoring that we can have, which, you know, I have never been in a situation where you can do so much with so much flexibility and build such a detailed and well thought out monitor for one specific purpose in such a short period of time and have it so everybody can literally see it and everybody watching it. So again, this is sort of an application that, you know, again, the point being, you would never almost really think that you could ever do this, especially in some of our business that are transactional, to some degree with any other product that I can think of that easily and with that amount of infrastructure that you can put it up and share it for everybody and do it, you know, across the region, across the globe. You know, so while I'm kind of on that idea for dissemination, a lot of what our product is to our clients is showing people good insights. It's not just about showing ads and running them the best way possible and some kind of ROI. So, one use that we have is that we have lots of account managers who are serving our clients, and they have all kinds of different skill levels. Many of them are just out of college. Some of them have 1 to 2 years of experience at some other ad agency. And they all have varying degrees of quantitative ability, storytelling ability. But one thing they are all great at is working with clients. And we know that if we can arm them with the right tools, they will generate, as much value as any technology could ever build. So, of course, one thing Tableau is great at, as you can see from the previous monitor, is visualizing information. And so all this information you're seeing is almost all the tactical information that we basically have at our fingertips. And there's, we want to share this sort of same information with our account management team, so they don't have to be making and downloading information and working with Excel and dropping stuff into PowerPoint and grinding. So what you're seeing here is actually a small sample chunk of our internal wiki, which we use for obviously internal knowledge purposes. But what we've actually built is an insight section of pre-built insight charts. So we have aggregate trend of, let's say, delivery and click-through rate metrics, video completion metrics that we use for our video campaigns. And I apologize for only showing you a chunk here. I kind of have to sanitize it. We have client information over here on the right. But how we've used our Tableau platform is that when we're talking about the context of insight for our account managers, we want to give them a tool that they can use for their clients that's as seamless as possible. And so we built in the basic tools so they don't have to work on Excel reporting, which is actually kind of a major idea if you think about it. But the more important thing is I can embed that tool in a context that they understand. So this is number one, basic performance trending. And what the whole point of this Wikipedia is to show basic examples of how they might use and describe a story. So again, I'm not telling them, here's a tool for you to use. Here's a story that you can use if you're talking about aggregate delivery, a multi-placement, or a pre-roll video campaign. Here are a couple of pitfalls that you might want to run into. Here's some great examples of how to do it before. All you have to do is select your advertiser and then export this chart. So again, this is all based on the same foundation of data that we kind of used in the previous charts, obviously a little bit sanitized and limited for that particular audience. But again, this is a usage that normally probably would have been thought about as a long engineering project that would probably have a limited flexibility. And literally, there's a different kind of report that needs to be made. I can really make one. Anybody can really make one, like in 5 minutes with the right amount of time, some good quality QA, print another example, and all of a sudden you have a really value-added report. So again, this is thinking about things that I never really thought possible, not even so much from a data discovery standpoint, but even how I actually even operate my business and how our product that goes to our clients is defined just by the flexibility of data that we have. Another use that I'm thinking about, and this is to some degree Tableau wagging what we have in the system, is I'm responsible for not only making money but making sure we have all the right resources aligned. And from an analytical point of view, I was thinking if we literally added a lot of our organizational metadata to our system. So before we kind of had basic, just maybe basically one assignment of the optimizer, the person running a campaign, in our internal platform. But there's no reason why I shouldn't add who are the account managers, sales strategists, and who all of our salespeople are. And what that allowed me to do is against the same data, I'm now looking at the number of campaigns over time and the number of products over time that everybody's managing. And this is a way for me to literally manage my human resources, my human resource capital, and seamlessly, aggregate this against revenue, against sizes. So this is just a great example of knowing what I could do in Tableau and then instrumenting my actual upstream system with metadata that, normally I probably would have had to gather from different teams across different countries, or God forbid, go through Salesforce to get this kind of data. So really for us, there's been, the uses have just really sort of been unlimited in a sense for our operational team, for any situational analysis, tactical, ad hoc, large analysis, consumption. So I didn't really show much of this to some degree for the secret sauce, but almost all of our sort of biggest analytical tables that inform our optimizers, different strategies they can take, are done in Tableau in different ways. So not only internally, externally, I kind of showed you what we've done for our client services team or our campaign management team. All manner of business reporting. And this is across all of our regions, across all of our businesses. The way we look at our business pretty much sits on this platform. And, you know, again, I think a large point of what I really want to get across is that these are all things that you would think you would need, but would kind of not necessarily have any way of getting at unless you really had this, to some degree, user-friendly bridge to access and spin the data, and it being able to have the amount of scope and flexibility to do what you need. But again, I'm kind of going back to what I started with, in the sense that, like, I can't have averages. But, you know, if you're thinking about doing any kind of similar setup to us, you do still have to think about aggregates at some point. The data has to come from somewhere, and, you know, the easiest way, I think, for any business user is to have flat files well thought out about around your business purposes. And that still takes a lot of work with your data team to do. But if you have a certain common understanding of, I think, Tableau's flexibility, and I think what I really appreciate about Tableau, it's very easy, I think, for the data team to understand in terms of what it can do in the data it provides, without them necessarily needing to get into flexibility of how and why you need to do it. You know, it allows you to sort of think about not one question or not a few variants of a question, but it allows you to think of consuming data in a much larger fashion and asking for data in a larger and more robust scope, which is, you know, I think quite frankly for at least a lot of people in my team, very different to how they've had to request any kind of data or insight in the past. Again, it's either order your big question, maybe get it back from your analyst, maybe go back and forth, or just take your limited scope and spin in Excel and see what you get, and maybe it's good enough for government work. So a couple of then closing thoughts on kind of that story. You know, I think the largest conclusion that I'm doing, it's not really hard to talk about a platform for your data team. And one thing I kind of would like to encourage everybody to avoid is that their tools and their capabilities doesn't have to wag your analysis of what you need to go for. I mean, especially in a situation like this with Server. And you know, one thing that's been really challenging in a good way is that because I've been able to have all this data and spin what I think are the right views, I've actually never been in such a data and information-rich environment. And to some degree now I have to truly think about where the analytical onus lies. Meaning, if I can understand this, who is actually the right person to be looking at this and figuring out this question? It's sort of the same case that now that I have a really, really robust way of getting client reporting data to my account management team, how does that change how I think about what their skill set should be? Before it was kind of like if they could print anything and get it out the door, that was sort of reasonable, and the client liked it, that was good. But now that we have a really standard way of doing very, very accurate reporting, what does that really mean for what they have to be able to do? Which is, I think, a great problem to have. And you know, you're just often surprised at what you're not looking at when you can look at things so quickly in a different way. So I would encourage everybody to, you know, with all the tools that are coming out there for business people to, you know, especially those who've sort of grown up either working with analysts or growing up working with just like Excel and your PowerPoint and your Roadshow, to really think big about what you can do. And this is about thinking big and differently about sort of the data set that you're asking for. So you can, you know, happily avoid what I call the soul's comfort of averages. And if anything, you can just generate cool art and put this up on your monitor and kind of make it look like you're doing work, which is another great advantage of having Tableau. It's kind of like I'm flying through the system and generating data and people are much hesitant to ask me questions for good or for bad. And it makes for some cool charts. So about running out of time here, and that's all I got. If you would like to ask me any questions, I guess this presentation will be made available to you as hopefully a way to contact me. So thank you very much.